You've played nothing but Helldivers for like 3 days now.
I can see through time.
I can see the air itself. Helldivers 2, my brain went to it's the next Pal World. I just mean it's the thing that's dominating everything. There are some specific reasons why, and then we're going to get into the overall conversation as to how much people are loving this game and what it's doing well. But I do want to shout out the game's sales are apparently over 1 million copies sold, according to the game's own creative director.
1 million.
1 million, according to creative director Johan Pilstedt. And also, we need to point out that the game did launch on PlayStation 5 and PC day and day, and it's had the highest Steam player count for a PlayStation game over on PC. Had 80,000 players on launch, which doesn't necessarily sound like too much if you're used to hearing about hundreds of thousands of people or whatever. But for a day one, for a game that only appeared in a couple of state of plays, it didn't necessarily have billboards, side of the bus advertising. It just blew up. Day one, it was 80,000. It's now over 160,000, but it has beaten God of War 2018's peak player count of 73,000 and Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered of 66,000 as well. And I do want to throw in the price point of being £35 over in the UK. You were saying it's £15 more for the deluxe edition, unless you have codes from Sony. Shout out to them for sending them over.
Just never going to leave.
Never going to live that down.
No.
But still, very much an approachable price point in regards to the usual expected amount of £70 or the higher amount. What do you think of all this? We'll get into some more things. I think there's some stuff to be talked about in regards to the whole Xbox have left behind. The whole divers they could have done with Gears of War. But yeah, what do you think of the game and everything else so far?
I mean, I love it. It's amazing. I'm having the best time with it. It's kind of everything that I wanted it to be, and I need everyone to know that in the What Culture Slack in January 4th, I actually messaged saying that Helldivers 2 would be a bigger hit.
You're the only believer.
I was the only. Well, I'm sure there were other people, but it's exciting, and I think the thing that I think is really helping the momentum of this game is that PC PS5 simultaneous release.
Yes.
I don't think this would be wouldn't have nearly as much momentum if it didn't have that PC release. Obviously, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because I don't think they were expecting that many players at launch. And obviously, there have been, server issues, matchmaking issues. The servers went down for a little bit yesterday, I believe, for maintenance. So, it's overall a net positive. I think this is an interesting strategy. I think this probably should signal a interesting shift in strategy. I could see, obviously, the PlayStation exclusive thing. So you would want to guard that to make sure that people are buying PlayStations. But I think Helldivers 2 is a bigger success for having that PC player base.
Oh, yeah, man, definitely. The thing is, I just remembered that Foam Stars came out at the end of last week as well.
Foam what?
Yeah, exactly. That game's being obliterated by
Where they make the foam
Helldivers.
from their bodies.
They do a bit. That also came out across the weekend, as well as their own excretions. The foam is bodily fluid. Google it. Turns out it's true. But that game is very much being wiped out. And if the conversation is on how much of a firm foot Sony can put forward for live services, Helldivers is the one. And I've been the biggest critic of all their stuff in regards to pivoting towards live service platforms and doing away with more cinematic stuff and more story-focused stuff or memorable characters or whatever. I shouldn't like Helldivers 2 in regards to most of the games that I do get stuck into. And like you said, it's an absolute blast. I also played a ton of it. I didn't play too much across the weekend, but it's just put together so well.
I've just got to liberate Super Earth, man. I went to the Automaton planet yesterday, and I can hear Creedence Clearwater Revival playing in my head in those jungles because those guys are terrifying. They have chainsaws.
Yeah, so there's a perfect segue because I wanted to shout out the music in this game. I said this back on Thursday, Friday, whenever we did the first video on it, that I feel like the game's secret weapon is its music because it reminds you of all the 90s action movies that you maybe grew up with, or 80s action movies, late 80s, early 90s, that specific sweet spot, the likes of Predator.
The greatest movie era of all time.
Yeah, especially for action cinema. And I wanted to shout out because I did see over on Twitter sound designer Danny Hay, who works for PlayStation, saying it's very rare for sound design to even be mentioned by players, influencers, and game critics, so even the tiniest piece of recognition means the world to us. Thank you all for your kind words. And also composer Wilbert Roger too, or the second, is also the main composer here. So I want way more documentaries, interviews, spotlights on this team because when you have dynamic sound design kicking in, the drum beat kicks in as you're about to escape or whatever, it just comes together in a way that it ices off the cake in a way.
It is really it's a massive achievement in terms of all this because not only on the sound design front do you have, we mentioned it last week, how you have those moments where you drop into a mission, you get the kind of slow build if you've not hot dropped into a bug nest and then got melted instantly, but you have that kind of explorative kind of, makes me the Alan Silvestri score from Predator where it's like, oh, something is mysterious, it's lurking, it's looking at us from beyond the scenes, and then you get the whole, when it does kick off and it's like
the motion tracker.
Oh my God, like going from just diving in and having the and then the ending, the extraction music is so good because it's just there and the drums start kicking in and it's like, And it's even better if you then set yourself on fire to save your team, which I've done multiple times.
But also, tip and trick the game doesn't tell you, fire does not burn you. Fire doesn't really burn you.
It does burn you.
But I didn't die. I didn't take much damage.
Yeah, well, you've like just walked through the napalm pretty quickly, but don't burn yourself with a flamethrower. You will die.
But also, you can run through the fire and the flames, as Dragon Force once did, and it will not kill you too fast. I do want to talk about Gears of War stuff, though, because I feel like this is when you play Helldivers, to me, it reminded me a lot of Gears of War, the heyday of Gears of War 2's Horde mode, which obviously came across into Gears of War 3, 4, and 5. But there was that specific energy of the first time we were, playing a Horde-based game mode with friends, and Helldivers reminds me of that sort of golden era when everyone's working together. And we'll talk about the specific co-op parts of Helldivers too. But I feel like on the Microsoft side, we had Gears 5 in 2019. It was solid enough. It was just a bit more Gears. There were some open world segments. But I feel like over the years, they've not capitalized on, for the last half decade, the emergence of live services. The fact that they could have had a Gears of War Horde mode and just call it Gears of War : Horde and have that be your free-to-play included with Game Pass. They could have had this Helldivers money. It was right there.
So the reason why I think this is working where other live services games have not worked for me is the lack of repetition. The procedural generated environments, probably they got a little bit of scrutiny in the previews because they were thinking, maybe this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I think this is the game's secret sauce because it's a case of no one mission feels the same. You've got the AI director changing the momentum of things. You've got the game masters over at Arrowhead who are then changing conditions of the actual galactic campaign itself. Each time you drop in, it feels different in a little way. Whereas for me, when I played Destiny, I don't know if that changed with the sequel, but when I was playing the first one, it felt like I was just doing the same mission over and over and over again.
The original, yeah.
And so this is like this to me, I think, is the reason why it works, and also the digestible format of it. Obviously, if you're playing a Horde mode in Gears, that's going to be nearly an hour you could potentially
if you're going for wave 50.
Whereas in this, it's a case of you get short 15 to 40 minute games, which then you look back on and you've sunk 5 hours into it and you're like, dear God, what did I do? But it's also digestible. You can just drop in, play a few games, help out the galactic campaign,
yes,
and then hop back out, which I think really helps. And it's also, again, a testament, I think, to how much Sony has been missing the boat on, having their own shooter. There's no, people have had to fill that gap with Call of Duty and Battlefield with diminishing returns the past decade or so. So this is, again, I feel like I'm very happy that this game is finding an audience.
Yeah, man, that side of it, the Sony side, the development side, the fact that they did buy Bungie, who would then sort of promote it to be this internal review board that were apparently going from studio to studio, evaluating potential live service games, and they were reportedly part of why Last of Us Factions got shut down. You have to imagine that Bungie were able, in some form, to pass some of the torch on to Arrowhead, some sort of conversation behind the scenes or whatever, saying these are the lessons we learned from Destiny 1 to 2. Because, I mentioned before about it doesn't necessarily have, cinematic cutscenes or character work or whatever, but you do have those cinematic moments, and you have that feeling of, I'm working with everyone to collectively take back certain quadrants of a universe map, a galaxy map.
It's like when you land on a planet and if you're in the automaton space, there's not many players there currently because it's not the main galactic mission right now is to push the bugs back from the secondary outlier planets that are close to Super Earth. So if you go to the automaton planet, there's not really that many ships in the atmosphere. But if you go to any of the planets the bugs are on currently, you'll see all these other ships around. I don't think those are players in real time. I just think that's simulating the number of people that are there. But it does make you feel as though you're part of that wider community objective, which is really fun. And just browsing online, people are buying into the whole satirical bent of the game by doing the whole, Super Earth needs you, and it's just
democracy.
That kind of tongue-in-cheek approach to it is really good. But yeah, the community aspect in particular is a big reason why. And again, those cinematic moments you get from playing the game, sometimes you'll have a very easy extraction, you'll have a very easy mission. Other times the bugs will literally chase you from the last objective you did all the way to the extraction zone. So you could have those great minutes where you'd call in a napalm strike or whatever, and your mate is trying to run through it just in time before the flames land and dives, and then it's so much fun.
There's a lot of the enemies are swarming the extraction zone and we're trying to get out, and it's the way that they balance clip sizes for weapons, your average amount of health, there are modifiers, things will change based on what armor you've got or whatever, but you end up with those really cool dynamic cinematic moments that are kind of bolstered by whatever memories you have of those movies in the first place. And you can argue that whole back and forth of how much is the game giving you versus the things it's pulling from. I think it's majority game, but I think it's backed by all those, like you said, the Predator stuff or the early 90s action cinema stuff. And it comes together really well, but it's kind of like it's such a an unexpected game to blow up. Like I feel like Sony always knew what they had, and you look back on the way that they rolled it out, where it popped up at a couple of state of plays. But like I said, it didn't have adverts on the side of buses or anything.
No betas, no tests before.
No, not a
launch
single
to kind of
test.
get people eyes on the game. Yeah,
which is weird because, like I said, it's like anathema of what they're supposed to be doing. Like and Foam Stars, we all knew that was coming out. Like I mean, it's Square Enix. It's only exclusive to PlayStation, but it is a Square Enix game. That was shown off a lot more, whereas like demonstrably that is the weaker game. And it's not that it doesn't play well enough, it's just that it's very much a Splatoon ripoff and then whatever. But I feel like the general buzz in the gaming space at the minute is Helldivers 2, and that's before we find out what the hell Microsoft's going to do as the week rolls on for the announcement they've got about Xbox. But it's just worth checking in when a game, with lower expectations blows the hell up. I always love putting the spotlight on these things and just looking at exactly why, and then paying off the likes of the composer, the music, the level design, things like that. We noted a couple of things down in regards to why it plays so well. Like you were saying, the fundamental co-op side is awesome. Like you do need to actually work as a team.
Yeah, you can play it pretty selfishly if you want to, and that's part of the fun. I think is getting team killed. I think if you're playing Helldivers 2 and getting annoyed that you're getting killed by teammates, you're not playing it correctly, because it is objectively very funny to get melted to death by your teammates' napalm strike. I'm saying that as the
my
one
head
who's,
many times.
You just show up. I called Scott Clippy the other day because he kept on walking into my line of fire every
Stop
time
shooting me,
I was
mate.
lining up a shot. It was like, hey, you want to shoot me? Don't do that. But yeah, no, the actual way you can coordinate stratagems in this game is really, really fun. You got to think about loadouts that you take into different missions. It's one of those where, again, to contrast with Suicide Squad, where I think that is a co-op game you can play selfishly. You're all working to the same objective, but ultimately the most you'll get from working together and having a tangible impact on each person's game is maybe revive a teammate, or you will have a perk that will help blow up some enemies or keep them suspended while another person shoots. Here, it boils down to more than just shooting. You have like certain weapons that need to be reloaded by a teammate. If you call in a stratagem that can like freeze enemies, that makes it easier for your teammates to then like call a different stratagem to then strike them down. You can have like a little rover dog on your back that like is a drone with a laser and it'll melt things for you. You can carry a supply pack. There's all sorts of different things going on here that really encourages you to think about it. You can just play it as like a basic kind of third-person shooter and have a lot of fun. But for those who want to look deeper, there is a really gratifying co-op experience at play here, which I feel like we've been missing. And even the other really exciting thing here, which I don't really think is being talked about that much, even though the game is getting a lot of praise, is the fact that the automaton planet missions feel way different to the Toned Planet missions. Like you go from playing like a horde mode game mode with the bugs, to then going to the automatons, and it's like you're playing a Terminator game. And you kind of really got to think about, obviously stealth is really an undervalued mechanic in both those planets, because the bug breaches in the bug ones will really mess you up. But even more so on the automaton one, you really have to think about how you're like maneuvering past patrols,
surveillance
and like line of sights, because you go from being able to shoot everything and not get much projectile damage unless you get in the weird, annoying cow bug things that melt you to death, to then having to think, okay, I actually get worried about these guys because they can shoot me, they can blow me up, they've got chainsaws. So that in itself is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other factions they eventually introduce, to see how they spice up this gameplay, because there's so much you can go with in terms of like vehicles, maybe like wider combat missions, like more open fields and stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what the future has to offer.
I love that feeling as well, where you love the core of a game. Everyone's loving the core of how it feels, and it's like, oh my god, I can't wait until they do this or this. Like for me, I'm thinking of like, and I'm not a big brand chasing person. Everyone who's watched me ramble on about how much I'm sick of the franchising of everything. But at the same time, for this, because they're connoting so much of that 90s and 80s action scene, it feels like you should do a Predator thing. And because everything, the way that they roll out their live service missions, where you bring up the universe map and it's like different populations, different percentages of planets are taken over, you could just say an anomaly has appeared on a certain planet and it's the Predator or whatever. And like you do those crossover things and let the fans discover it in real time, essentially. Like I'm kind of hoping for those things. And when you said vehicles as well, part of the fun, like you said, if the enemies chase you so much, part of the fun is making that big last-ditch effort across the map to escape.
Yes.
But if you could all bundle into something like a Warthog, that would also
be really fun
great.
if you literally had a guy who so you have to call in the vehicle, it spawns in another part of the map, so the driver has to get to you. So the player has to drive to you to then pick you up and then make your escape.
That'd be a shot. Because then one person has to like sort of peel off and make even a more of a sacrificial run to try and get the vehicle. But yeah, it's kind of everything at the minute, and it just has such a good game first sensibility, like it's such a good game brain on its shoulders. Like I said, it's just worth shouting out. So yeah, shout out to Helldivers 2. You're pretty awesome.